the disruptive technology of artificial intelligence, and how it is transforming international diplomacy and security. To discuss all of that and more, I'd like to welcome to the stage Ambassador Paula Dobriansky, Vice Chair of the Atlantic Council's Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security, and a former U.S. Undersecretary of State for Global Affairs, along with our distinguished panelists.
Oops, that's okay.
I didn't do it.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry. How about that?
Well, we're off to a bang here. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. And yes, this is indeed the panel that's going to focus on artificial intelligence and diplomacy. And we have really the two perfect, distinguished speakers to address this issue who are really going to make sense of this issue, because we know artificial intelligence is, in fact, reshaping the world. In fact, I almost was tempted, as those questions were being asked, I started writing them down. And I don't know, Jenna, when you revealed the results, I was thinking I might do a little side poll over here of these two, you know, to see where they come out with those questions, you know? Well, I am joined today by Ambassador Kevin Rudd and Dave Levy, who indeed are going to make sense of this very important topic. They're going to talk about how AI has transformed diplomacy, how to look at it in the context of international collaboration, and also how it can be harnessed for the global good. Let me introduce, if I may, Ambassador Kevin Rudd first. He is Australia's ambassador to the United States of America. He took on this position in March of 2023. He served as the 26th Prime Minister of Australia from 2007 to 2010. And then as Minister for Foreign Affairs, he was also Prime Minister again in 2013, and you also served as a Member of Parliament from 1998 to 2013. And I'd like to welcome and introduce Dave Levy, who is the Vice President of Amazon Web Services Worldwide Public Sector. And you have a mammoth portfolio. He leads government, education, healthcare, aerospace, and satellite and non-profit businesses globally. Previously, he was 6 years with AWS and with a primary focus on healthcare, global healthcare, but also nonprofit and government. And before that, 12 years with Apple. So let me go to a groundbreaking event that took place in Australia in July. And it was at that time that Amazon Web Services, they entered into a groundbreaking partnership to provide the Australian government actually with top secret cloud, which, you know, it's for defense and intelligence data. But significantly, what it has done, it basically provides Australian officials to collaborate very closely with the United States and to take advantage of our own technologies such as artificial intelligence. So with that backdrop, I want to go to you, Dave, first with a core question. Tell us, really, what's the larger significance of agreements like this one? And what do they signify about the very future of public-private partnerships that could basically look like the dawning age of AI?
Well,
and welcome to you both.
Yeah, first of all, it's great to be here, and I think what just happened, that's an example of 100 years of mateship, at least, so thank you. Thank you for helping me out.
I thought it was a fake event myself.
I do think, well, first of all, we're thrilled. We've had a long partnership with Australia at our company and Amazon, and we've invested heavily in Australia in all sorts of dimensions, and they've been a fantastic partner to us. And so I think with this most recent partnership we developed, I think what we hope it portends and what we plan for it to portend is that the Australian government has the ability to have even more resiliency, even more speed, even more agility with the type of infrastructure that we can provide and the services that we can provide. in our cloud. And so it's a very exciting opportunity, I think, particularly given the situations in the Indo-Pacific area. We want, for us, we look at relationships like these as providing the best technology available that our customers can use, and so we're thrilled, and we think that'll happen.
Well, it's important indeed, and I use the word groundbreaking because it was indeed groundbreaking. Ambassador Rudd, same question from your perspective.
I think, as Dave has just said, I mean, the Australian government for a long time has had a deep relationship with AWS and its competitors. We have long had a view that through our own competitive tendering processes that we should get the best available in the Five Eyes world. Five Eyes is no small thing. It's been around since 1948. It's an intelligence sharing agreement between 5 countries, the US, the UK, Australia, Canada and New Zealand, which comes out of World War II levels of strategic collaboration. And so 3/4 of a century of trust building means that when it comes to the sharing of a whole range of technologies and a whole range of technology platforms which are enablers, including the most recent ones, we have always been at the forefront of, shall we say, adoption. And, frankly, some innovation as well. By the way, Paula Dobriansky, next time you use Wi-Fi, that's an Australian invention developed by our own national labs in Australia. Though if you were to look at the American purveyors of Wi-Fi, you'd never know that. But we've been out there as well. With AWS and what we've done recently with Top Secret Cloud is that we have no qualms whatsoever about the level of private-public partnership we engage with security cleared and security trusted partners here in the United States. As you know, there are multiple levels of clearance in this country. We share those clearance categories as Five Eyes partners, therefore we're open to this level of collaboration with AWS. And finally, I think the realization within governments across the Five Eyes is that the possibility of developing these leading edge technologies within government, somehow hermetically sealed from the private sector, is just a nonsense. Something which I think our Chinese friends may well discover as they seek to bring everything in-house themselves within state-owned, shall we say, enterprises and state-controlled laboratories. Whereas the genius of enterprise innovation across the Five Eyes countries, in particular here in the United States, is this extraordinarily dynamic private sector. And so the partnership is good, it's strong, and its utility for us in bringing together the various arms, the intelligence and defence communities and the foreign policy communities in, shall we say, the sharpest edged decision making that's possible is good.
Let me ask both of you the same question again, but work backwards. So Ambassador Rudd, let's begin with you on this one.
He's smarter, put him first.
Well, I'm going to let you exercise diplomacy here on the question first, okay? And that is, how does AI, or how has it impacted traditional diplomatic methods? And how are organizations actually, and governments actually adapting to this? What's been the impact from where you're sitting? And then I am definitely coming to Dave.
Let me give you 2 examples in different domains, rather than seeking to be comprehensive in the answer, but 2 not insignificant examples. One is the unfolding impact of artificial intelligence in the wider world of, let's call it, cybersecurity. This is a real-world, daily, hourly challenge for each and every institution represented in this room today, against a whole bunch of state-based and supposedly non-state-based actors. So therefore, the capacity for artificial intelligence to turbocharge cyber attacks is significant. However, AI also provides, shall we say, enabling tools for cyber defense as well. So AI has a capacity to radically, and is having a capacity to radically change what is already a complex and difficult cyber landscape. Second example, let's go back to more classical diplomacy. One of the things which I think foreign services will be adjusting to is the fact that when you look at generative AI, as it evolves, and not beyond the where were my shoes made questions, but more complex geopolitical questions, that not all wisdom will necessarily lie in the policy planning branches of our respective foreign services or the US State Department. That is, given the mountain of big language data and big learning capabilities which exist within the emerging technologies, the ability to harvest much larger slabs of real-time data to inform, shall we say, core decisions and core analyses about the near to medium term future. See, often the human brain, and those of us who are collaborating as a bunch of human brains within bureaucracies and political systems, we are often constrained by the extent of who's available, who's on tap, and frankly, what's on file. And therefore, you will end up with a view of reality which is at best partial. Now, as generative AI becomes more refined over time, its ability to augment our existing, shall we say, human judgments, but human analytical frameworks with new data points which may be challenging to some of those frameworks, is, I think, enormously potentially useful. Then the final point, which I'm sure we'll probably go to later in the conversation, is looking at also the global public goods that we're all working on, where AI can play an enormously positive role. When I start to think about our ability to do advanced, shall we say, clinical trials for drug treatments for cancer, and your ability to take all this primary data together quickly and use AI to do processing in a manner which once would have taken a dozen years and now can take a dozen seconds. The ability to get, therefore, innovation from the lab into a clinical application for dealing with global health policy challenges, including, for example, the next pandemic, whenever that occurs, is, I think, on the upside in terms of its utility in classic global public diplomacy.
So it sounds like overall you see it as positive, and that governments and organizations are adapting well to it. And if you don't mind my pushing you on one thing, because your own career, you started in the foreign ministry, and
in the days of quill and ink. That's right.
and traditional diplomacy. So with the quill and ink to the present, seriously, you do see it as positive. It has its, I think you've articulated its advantages.
I've never been a technophobe about this stuff. I've seen the enormous, I mean, I'm a graduate in classical Chinese poetry. What would I know? Okay, this ain't my shtick. That's why this guy Dave is much brighter on this stuff. But what I've seen is, frankly, the liberating dimensions of technological innovation, including in this domain. We should always keep our mind open to it while still being sober about questions of governance, both national and global governance, around the future of AI. Our own government, for example, has recently released a series of framework papers and framework governance arrangements which look at managing the negatives or managing the potential downsides. But this is a glass which is, in my judgment, and here I'm just speaking personally, more than half full rather than half empty.
All right. Dave, let's come to you on that. And it'd be great to get your perspective on this, because from where you're sitting, and I went to Ambassador Rudd first just because of his background in diplomacy, but how do you see it in terms of the traditional tools of statecraft?
Well, I don't have a background in diplomacy or Chinese poetry, for that matter. But I would say, just to build on what Ambassador Rudd was saying, I think fundamentally the way we see things is that if you have a mission such as diplomacy, our technologies and cloud technologies in general are enabling that mission in the ways, in many of the ways that Ambassador Rudd talked about. The services that we build, the infrastructure that we build and deploy, it allows fundamentally for organizations to move faster, to do things with speed, I talked about earlier about the fact that speed isn't a preordained thing. You have to actually make that happen. You have to have the infrastructure in place. You have to have the environment in place to make speed happen. The possibility in research is really quite promising and remarkable. The possibility for drug discovery, to accelerate drug discovery in these areas. And so we're in a unique position where we are, on behalf of our customers, building the tools that will enable those sorts of things to happen. But it can also happen in fairly routine use cases and paradigms, like searching through regulations, searching through policy, simplifying processes, providing responses, potential responses and answers that can then be vetted by humans in the loop. So we see a vast amount of opportunities, and I think what we like to say is, in the fullness of time, AI and generative AI are going to reinvent every customer experience we know today. And we see that happening already with public sector organizations around the world.
Ambassador Rudd invoked generative AI. Let's dive a bit deeper with you on generative AI, and basically define for us how you currently see that as changing the international public sector landscape. And also, what do you see in the future?
Yeah.
Can you give us a window as to what's next?
Sure. There are a number.
Since we're talking about the digital frontier.
Yeah, there are a number of opportunities, and some of those we see already taking shape. I mentioned some. There are some really basic things that are happening, like you can take information that exists today in text and documents and voice, and you can convert that information into something that is fast and useful, that is prompt generated for your constituents, for your stakeholders, for your citizenry, for your internal purposes. You can use generative AI to help think about how to educate differently. The research around education has evolved over the years, and I think what we know about education is that students all learn in different ways at different times. And so the opportunity with generative AI and technologies like these is to start creating more personalization in the education space, more personalization in the healthcare space. And when we go around the world, what we see is customers are really hungry for these sorts of innovations, but they're also hungry to do it in a way that's efficient and fast, also responsible, and that has governance around it. And so generative AI for us really has almost future-looking potential that we haven't really thought of. Much like when there was quill and ink, we couldn't imagine a day where we wouldn't need that anymore. There will be things invented that we don't really know today.
To build on Dave's point about public health, which is near and dear to everyone in this room, particularly as you become more antique, you become more concerned about these things. When I was Prime Minister, we pioneered the rollout of personally controlled digital health records right across the country, involving every arm of the health system, from general practitioners through to acute medicine in hospitals, through to palliative care, through to aged care, through to other forms of post-acute care. And the theory then was that this is good because health practitioners at whichever point of the process, when you're dealing with a single patient or a single person or a single customer, could therefore have the best informed, as it were, clinical decision in terms of what am I looking at here. You roll on a decade and a half since we did that. The great virtue of AI, properly applied at multiple levels, is to rapidly distill this data around the single person. So it doesn't matter where you are, anywhere in the world, this can be put together quickly. And secondly, the ability for AI to synthesize, shall we say, the generic health, shall we say, advice about this particular condition that you may have, in the hands of a particular general practitioner who may not be the world's leading expert on ingrown toenails. But let me tell you, within a very short period of time, they're going to be able to distill that and look at the particular history of your ingrown toenail as well. And so the ability, therefore, to produce better health outcomes is not off in la-la land. It's actually much nearer term. And in a country such as this, where you major in what I describe as multiple health diagnostics, repeat diagnostics, and therefore, why do you guys spend 20% of GDP on health? One of the reasons is because your system doesn't talk to itself. Another reason is because you're constantly doing repeat diagnostics. This is potentially revolutionary in actually reducing the number and intensity of repeat diagnostics and being able to get to quick clinical decisions about a patient which are in fact better than under the existing system.
Dave, do you want to add anything to that? Because you had the healthcare sector
Sure.
with Amazon Web Services, and just, I mean, the point about this can revolutionize the way we deal with the health sector.
Sure. We were chatting earlier about the fact that the health sector has such a tremendous opportunity, and so it's not just drug discovery and research, although those areas are areas of enormous opportunity. It is in these areas of efficiency and speed, and I think if you look at in a place like healthcare, if you look at imaging, and the vast majority of images that are read, CT scans or others, 80% or some number of that image is pretty confident could be read by an application, and that gives the practitioner, the radiologist in that case, the opportunity for her to really narrow in on the areas of concern, and that's more opportunity to speed to diagnosis, more opportunity to rule out other things and get patient outcomes faster. And as Ambassador Rudd mentioned, combining that with other data, and this is what these technologies, what cloud and generative AI and AI, this is what these technologies make possible in a way that wasn't possible before. And then you think about the impact then you have on the entire system of healthcare, around the operations, things like staffing, modeling how you're going to run through a pandemic and what you'll need. I think healthcare is an area where we're really going to see some big gains over the years as those organizations start to embrace it.
The possibilities and the innovation in this particular domain, it sounds like it's truly endless. I mean, and it's obviously significantly will impact the global community, and completely in this space. If I may, Ambassador Rudd, may I go to adversarial relationships? You've had a few adversarial relationships you've had to deal with in your time. And so, it's been said.
Last time I looked, you've got a few in this country too.
We know that, certainly there are those adversarial governments who have often strived to exploit emerging technologies, as we know, and to challenge global norms and basically to disrupt alliances. So from that standpoint, what can be done in this space? I mean, what are the kinds of steps that can be taken to counter those kinds of disruptions? I think an important area in space here is really the kind of collaboration and what kinds of alliances, what kinds of norms can be built in this area to counter this kind of exploitative behavior.
Well, we live in a adversarial world. I wish we could say it wasn't, but it is. And if we were to do a quick barometer today over, and we're heat mapping where cyber attacks are coming from against a whole range of institutions in this country, then you'd end up with a list of state actors and allied state actors, which becomes a pretty familiar list. It's the reality. So let's not pretend it's not. And the objectives behind that are multiple. They're not singular. They're not simply about disruption, nor are they singularly about, shall we say, industrial, commercial, or intellectual property theft. They are also engaged in the business of one level or another of fake as well, which in terms of democratic political processes is a deeply fundamental and, shall we say, sensitive domain, as each of us in democracies regularly face elections. And it's no surprise that the adversarial column over here do not regularly face elections. So that's by way of defining the problem. In terms of the response, there are multiple levels of response, the core to which is for us always to be in the domain of secure, confident PPP relationships with major providers like AWS and others, and governments, so that you are constantly being one step ahead of the game. This is rapidly evolving. It is not static, it is dynamic, and therefore anyone who thinks that we have landed in a state of perfect post-cyber nirvana is deluding themselves. Within that, again, I think the challenge of, shall we say, cyber hardening, cyber defense, across not just what governments do, but across the range of our critical infrastructure and beyond our critical infrastructure into our major corporations and, frankly, the arteries of our civil infrastructure is equally important. That is an ongoing project across the democratic world. The dilemma for us is that we believe in open societies, open economies, and open politics, okay? And there's a whole bunch of people from a different part of the world who seek to exploit each and every one of those levels of openness. Therefore, the defensive task we have is infinitely more complex than, frankly, that which may have to be exercised by others. But it's still doable. So, and the final point in order to achieve the latter is sufficient consciousness raising across the general community in all of our countries that cyber risk, including my own personal bank account, through to my own personal credit card, through to the integrity of my financial institution, or the not-for-profit that I support, or the politician that I vote for, that this is sufficiently clear in general consciousness to support the political mandate for governments to partner with the community in cyber hardening and cyber defense. I think they are among the principal challenges and opportunities.
Dave, let me ask you, if you like to comment on that, please do. One word, I extracted here the issue of resiliency and how AI really in that space can be advanced and be beneficial. But let me add, I asked about adversarial relationships, but let me go to another issue, and that's about communication and cultural understanding. And just get your reaction on this. Are there ways in which AI itself can really knock down certain barriers due to language, or vastly different political systems of governments, et cetera? Is that an area where AI can be a benefit, and there are opportunities?
Sure. Well, let me comment on the first part,
Sure.
which is we at AWS we have a global infrastructure. We operate in 180 different countries around the world. We have commercial customers on our platform. We have public sector customers on our platform. Big parts of Amazon.com, which I'm sure a lot of us use. I know most of my paycheck goes right back to the company in that regard. So we have millions and millions of active customers on our platform every day. And those customers, we have to protect all of their sensitive information every millisecond of the day. And so our customers on the platform inherit a lot of those protections, and our job is, top job in the company is security and resiliency of those systems. So we take that under house for ourselves and for our customers as literally the priority we have every day. And so and I think Ambassador Rudd hit on something. That training and education happens inside of the company. It happens externally with our customers and partners, and we share information. Given the fact that we've got this global infrastructure that all of us use, we share that information actively, and we have great partnerships with Australia and many other countries around the world. To the second part of the question, which is, do we think AI can help solve some of these challenges that happen between individuals and between countries, between groups?
Due to language, culture, other kinds of barriers.
I would react to that by saying, this technology is fundamentally an enabler to make information more transparent, move faster, be able to help provide information, provide it with context or multiple contexts for organizations and for people to use. And so you could, theoretically, you can train an AI customer service agent to speak as many languages fluently as you want it to. And it can respond to you. And with enough data and the right governance around it, make sure it's giving you appropriate responses and not responses that you don't want, or unacceptable responses or unwanted responses. And so, you can help facilitate things with this technology that were previously not possible.
Well, I asked the question because we're focused on global diplomacy and the issue of AI and diplomacy. And diplomatic issues also can certainly arise because of a lack of understanding of culture, or because of linguistic disputes or differences. And in this case, I think you've really answered it. I mean, I don't think everyone always thinks of AI in that context of actually being a facilitator. Would you agree?
If you look at diplomacy, and occasionally we Australians practice diplomacy,
occasionally.
is that diplomatic disagreements usually arise for either of, among three sets of reasons. One is a dearth of information and not acting off a common database of knowledge, and that's where, frankly, AI can be helpful. The second is a conflict of interests where AI is useless because they just have different interests. And the third, and this is probably equally but more complex in its nature, differences of underpinning values, because AI does not properly compute values, and nor can it infer what your interest should be. But it can help in clearing the terrain in terms of a common informational domain in order to reach a reasonable decision. Often, I'm most familiar with dealing with China, for example, although I notice because of your large language learning models that I'll soon be rendered redundant, and you'll have a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of machines who'll be perfectly literate in classical Chinese poetry. So I'm for the scrap heap. But when it comes to many disagreements with our Chinese friends, for example, the term most often used in Chinese is 就是很大的一个误解, this is a great misunderstanding, to which I often say to my Chinese interlocutors, why? What's the misunderstanding here? Is it one of fact, is it one of interest, or is it one of values? And if you can then dig into the questions of fact using whatever tools are available to you, including this, and maybe even a joint generative AI question to examine the history of territorial claims in the South China Sea using all data sources known since the beginning of time, that'd be kind of interesting exercise in terms of where it finally shakes out. I'm not sure all parties to that disagreement would welcome that.
You're probably right about that. You know, both of you have well articulated how AI can really make a difference in terms of the health sector. I mean, and really revolutionize it, and I think it's consequential. Let me go to two other areas that a lot of people talk about and care about. The environment, the issue of climate change, and by the way, cybersecurity. Say a bit about that in terms of the connectivity. I think one could think about, particularly in the environmental and climate change, because of data, but still articulate it. So I think it's an area that we, far too often don't make these connections. So cybersecurity and also climate change.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are broad opportunities in both, and I would tell you that on the climate side, there are going to be, I think, a number of ways in which AI can help do everything from predictive modeling about, what are the conditions under which things are going to present themselves? What options do we have for those conditions? There are areas like material science, which I think will benefit greatly from potential breakthroughs with AI and generative AI. So I think on the climate side, we're really early, and I think these technologies are going to give us the ability to think about how to solve some of these problems in a way we haven't had the chance to. On the cyber side, I think Ambassador Rudd talked a little bit about that earlier, and look, on the cyber side, some of the things that matter are visibility, the ability to have visibility into applications and into systems, and quick visibility when there are cyber attacks. Having as much, I would say, time on task in that visibility and being able to interdict really quickly. Those are keys in cyber, and AI and generative AI can allow organizations to do that and build those things. I think one of the things we do on the cyber side is we're providing infrastructure and a set of tools so that any given organization can move really quickly to build the things that they need on the cloud. And they can experiment. They can, if they haven't seen something that hasn't come before. And I think they can communicate faster. I think one of the big things to get after in this is communication. Being able to communicate on a common platform, being able to do it very quickly can make all the difference in this kind of environment, which I think Ambassador Rudd nailed. The term is dynamic. It is millisecond dynamic in the cyberspace. And the ability to respond with AI, generative AI applications, or something that you can create very quickly, that you need to create for a new attack, is one of the critical pieces.
Ambassador, do you want to comment on this as well? Because
very much
thinking
on
about
the climate
Australia,
question.
right? Australia has been very engaged in that and in the lead.
Yeah. We've discussed cyber resilience, cyber security, and as Dave just said, it's early identification, early response within nanoseconds in order to be effective is kind of the leading edge of the game. But flipping back to the other question you raised, which was climate change. I mean, I've long been a believer in the imperative of climate change action over many decades now, simply because I'm an old-fashioned empiricist. I just believe in the scientific data. Whoops, it's getting warmer. Why is it getting warmer? It's anthropogenic. What are we going to do about it? Reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I think part of the political problem in most of our democratic jurisdictions, but not all, is making graphic and useful for the current political debate where we are headed in a manner which is meaningful for the voting public. For example, when we've asked up until now the International Panel of Climate Change Scientists, that worthy body of 4,000 humorless scientists in white coats who every several years put together their prognostications about where the planet is going. It's essentially undigestible and unreadable for the voting public. It's a really important scientific resource. How can you use, therefore, the tools of artificial intelligence and generative AI to collate and project in a manner which makes graphic and clear for people what is actually happening, not just in global averages, but in communities, in countries, and across a whole series of different data inputs. And then, rather than just condemn people to an irreversible future, to go to the other point which Dave raised, using generative AI to then begin analysing for the voting public clear sets of policy options with cost benefits, so that the discussion and the debate about climate change becomes more accessible, amenable for average voters when they make decisions, as opposed to this binary we seem to have at the moment in many countries, which is to believe in climate change is to believe in the end of Western civilization as we know it, versus a view which is anchored in the UN panel of climate change scientists over here, holding this series of scientific truths near and dear to their bosom, uninterpretable, unimaginable, and certainly not graphic enough for the wider voting public. I think AI and generative AI and its ability to paint living pictures, putting together all the variables, is probably as yet an untapped tool in shaping the future climate change action debate.
Dave, do you agree with that?
I agree. I think, you know, in this space where data really is the newest, most valuable resource, the ability to take your own data, different sets of data, large language models, train this data to get predictive outcomes, to get options, to build applications, to inform not only the public, but maybe to inform where do we need to move resources for the next food insecurity crisis or the next housing crisis. So this ability to take data sets and start to build applications, generative AI applications and AI applications that are going to be useful along a number of dimensions, I think it's a needed future and it's an exciting future.
I want to get into the time we just have, and we have very limited time. I want to just ask Ambassador Rudd you a question about norms, and the question of, and then to ask both of you what's your final message for this audience, both of you. But a brief one for you, Ambassador Rudd, on norms. What's the challenge here? Are we going to be able to establish standards and without impacting national sovereignty here?
Yes, I think we can. I do not believe, however, we're going to be able to agree on global standards. The truth is, authoritarian states have a different worldview, and therefore they will not share what the democratic world holds to be near and dear in terms of the ultimate sovereignty of citizens, as well as underpinning values of individual freedom. So if you accept that as a reality, an unfortunate reality, but it's a reality, and the challenge for us is to develop AI governance norms which are applicable to the democracies writ large. You don't have to be a Rhodes Scholar in this room to work out that there are differences between the Europeans on the one hand and the Americans on the other, and various other shades of us, including Australians, somewhere in between. There is no ultimate repository of wisdom on this question, but getting the balance right between protecting, shall we say, the individual, protecting the individual from, shall we say, unintended consequences of state or mega corporate possession of data to the greatest extent that we can, is a challenge which reasonable people within our democracies, I believe, we can agree on. I think it is, however, a bridge far too far to assume, as some folks hope and aspire, that the bridge can be crossed between the democratic world and the authoritarian world.
Do you have just a final message, a brief one, 40, 30 second, and then I'm going to give Dave the last word in closing before we close our
My
session.
simple message is where we began, and that is when it comes to AI and generative AI, the glass is more than half full. And we should approach it in terms of the opportunities it provides humankind. And then as we begin to encounter in the real world, real challenges which affect my privacy as an individual or my sovereignty as a country then begin to generate the policy responses around those real world problems rather than what I describe as a bogus debate, which is when we next meet for UN General Assembly week, we'll all be arrested by a bunch of anonymous robots, which is kind of where the sci-fi debate is taking some of the public discourse at present.
All right, well, Dave, how about you? You've given a terrific window on what AWS does. What's your message for our audience here?
Well, I won't comment on the autonomous robots piece, but I will say...
So it's true then.
I will say that we fundamentally believe generative AI is going to reshape every experience we know in the fullness of time. And these technologies hold a lot of promise for innovation, for entrepreneurship, and for increased productivity. And I do think that countries around the world will have a fairly common point of view on things like reliability and security and privacy, explainability, protecting data. So I do think we will get there. I think there's already a lot of really great work going on between public and private, and these partnerships are bearing fruit. And so we may disagree on some edges, and as an industry partner to public sector organizations, we want to play a key role in helping them do that. The technology is possible, and now we've got to put it into action.
One footnote from me, if I can, Paula. I forgot. We cannot externalize, however, this time round, what we've done in previous large-scale technological industrial revolutions. We cannot externalize social and employment consequences. These have to be considered seriously and in tandem with the upside. Otherwise, the chasms which potentially open up in society simply fuel further division. So this shouldn't be seen as something for them to do, some branch of government, but for us also to PPP ourselves through so that the whole of society in the democratic world can come with us.
I want to thank Fred, Jenna, and Graham. Graham, you're right there, and his team for holding this session. So we'll be coming back next year, and we're praying there aren't robots over but thank you for bringing us together, and please join me in thanking them for really opening up our eyes on what the possibilities are here.
Thank you.